I told you guys a couple years ago, we hosted a general strike summit on RBN. And one of the conclusions that we came up with is that in order to have a general strike in this country that is going to be successful, you will have to disrupt the supply chain. This is why a lot of us were excited when the railroad workers wanted to go on strike, because we knew that could disrupt the supply chain. But the Biden administration jumped right in and ended that before it could be a thing. I also told you that there are different sectors of labor that could make that happen. One is the trucking industry. The other one was, of course, the railroad workers. And last but not least, the dock workers, the workers that work at the ports all up and down the coast of this country. Now, yesterday, it was announced that it was a possibility that they would go on strike. Let's go ahead and get started with that clip here from News Nation.
Strike for union workers at major shipping ports along the East Coast. Thousands are set to hit the picket line this Tuesday. The International Longshoremen's Association ordering a strike after talks demanding fairer wages hit a standstill. News Nation's Caitlin Becker joins us live from Port Elizabeth, New Jersey. Caitlin, what are we learning here? Major developments since the last time we spoke.
Yeah, truly, Jesse. I was not expecting to hear this today. We're 36 hours before the deadline, and the ILA sent out a communication announcing that they're absolutely going to strike. They're going to walk off the job when their current contract expires. Now, it's a 6-year contract. Each of these contracts are 6 years, and the expiration date is midnight on Monday. So 12:01 Tuesday, these workers are going to walk off the job. There's going to be a full-on work stoppage up and down the East Coast and parts of the Gulf. Now, the ILA has not released any details specifically about exactly where these picket lines are going to be. They said that's going to come likely sometime tomorrow. However, they did note what the major issue was, and it really came down, Jesse, to wage stagnation. They said that the U.S. Maritime Alliance, that is who they're in talks with, or were in talks with, just wouldn't come to an agreement about what they called wage subjugation that they said had been happening for years.
Now, it's part of this strike is due to wage stagnation, but it's not the only reason. Another big concern, which you will see expressed in just a second, is automation. Automation, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I seem to remember in 2020 on the debate stage, Andrew Yang seemed to be the only candidate that was running through the Democratic Party that was focused heavily on automation. And he did try to warn people that this was going to be a problem. And here we are. Now, I want you to pay attention here to the locations. We're talking about all up and down the East Coast and, of course, the Gulf Coast. Boston, New York, New Jersey, Newark, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Wilmington, North Carolina, Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina, Jacksonville, Florida, Miami and Tampa, Florida, Mobile, Alabama, New Orleans, and Houston. So we are talking about thousands of workers going on strike.
To tell you that from the USMX perspectives, they have said time and again that they were offering industry-leading wages more than the 32%, which was the last hike that their West Coast counterparts got for their contract last year. But the ILA wanted a 77% wage hike, and they just couldn't come to an agreement. Now, these two groups haven't been at the negotiating table for months. These talks stalled back in June. So this is something, kind of an eventuality that we were all expecting. And the ILA president has said in the past that they've been planning for this for a year. So the impacts could be far ranging, though, Jesse.
Can we talk about that? Because what we're referring to, just to make it clear for our audience, is essentially the entire East Coast. What is the impact on customers come Tuesday?
Could be pretty large. Probably Tuesday itself, we won't feel it, but the ripple effect, according to retail experts, are things that we could certainly feel. And you said pretty much the entire East Coast, and I actually want to read you the list of the 14 ports that are going to be impacted. They're, of course, the port of New York and New Jersey, which is where I'm at right now, as well as the ports of Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Norfolk, Wilmington, Charleston, Savannah, Jacksonville, Miami, Tampa, Mobile, New Orleans, and Houston. That's a massive, massive number of huge cities. And every single good you can think of flows in and out of these ports. So so every single good that you can think of, I'm talking about
most of the products that you see at Walmart or Target, the grocery store, for goodness sakes, ladies and gentlemen. And how will this impact us? So think about that. For example, if there is a shortage of supply, obviously that means that prices will increase if this strike continues. Now, let's hopefully, they're able to get what they want. But I do want to show you some of the impacts that could happen, the possibility that this port strike could send us into a possible recession. Let's get into that.
Last night at midnight, 45,000 U.S. dock workers walked off the job, launching a strike that has shut down 36 ports along the East Coast and the Gulf of Mexico, threatening to disrupt the nation's supply chain. Joining us right now to provide some data into just how much disruption we're facing is Alan Murphy. He's the CEO and founder of Sea Intelligence. And Alan, we've heard a lot of different numbers. By your estimates, how much does this cost the nation a day?
It's incredibly hard to estimate. Various estimates from different economists puts it somewhere between $3 and $5 billion per day. But it's both what does it mean in delayed shipment, what does it mean to higher freight rates. It's all a very volatile game, but certainly it's going to be very, very costly, several $1 billion per day of strike. And that's the fundamental challenge here. We don't know how long a potential strike or how long the strike will potentially last.
Well, let's walk through some of the potential timelines on this. What happens if this lasts the first week or two? What are the ramifications we can expect to see?
Well, it will certainly be a challenge especially for importers, especially if you have perishable goods moving in refrigerated containers. If they start to fail or they lose power. If you've got bananas, they're supposed to ripen over a certain time. If they spend another week, they start to spoil. Within a week, it's going to be costly and it's going to impact those importers that are waiting for the boxes. But it's a manageable crisis. If it lasts 2 weeks, then it starts getting to be a big challenge because we'll start to see vessels missing that are now stuck in ports outside of the U.S. ports. They won't make their journey back to Asia and to the other origin regions, which will push up freight rates. So 2 to 3 weeks, it starts to get a really big problem, and we will see cost of shipping globally, not just to the U.S. East Coast, but globally start to push up.
And also, it's not even just about affecting consumers and us, buying these products or buying these goods. But when we think about food, and I mentioned the grocery store, that also impacts restaurants as well. Restaurants also depend on some of those goods he was talking about, like bananas, right? Like what restaurant doesn't use bananas for something, whether it's a mixed drink or some type of concoction behind the bar, whether it's a dessert. I mean, this is something like seriously consider and think about. And one thing that was really interesting, what they said is that these workers have been preparing for this for a year. So that means that the CEO, they have had over a year to meet their demands. So it's not like this came out of the blue, just came out of nowhere. They knew that this was a possibility. They knew that this was coming. Now, I want you to hear from the ILA president, Harold Daggett, because he really had some things to say to reporters. This reporter that you're going to hear from Fox News seriously tries to blame him for impacting the economy or the possible impact of the economy. You guys have got to hear this. This is hilarious.
Over the weekend, the past
Secretary of Labor Julie Su has been terrific. She's knocking down doors. She's trying to stop this. She's trying to get us to a media where we can have a fair negotiations. It's the companies that don't want to. They don't want to sit here and be fair. So that's why we're out here fighting for our livelihood.
What more from the automation do you want? What more protections could there be?
What more?
Yeah, they have language in there now.
Not strong enough, because what happens is...
Do you hear what she just said? What more protections could there be? What more could you want? How dare you ask for something else? Typical response, right? Blame the worker. And I've said this before. Blaming the worker is a bad idea. That's not going to make them change their mind and say, okay, we're not going to do this strike anymore. Bad idea. They should be pointing their fingers at the higher ups. They should be pointing their fingers at the bosses, the CEOs, the people who are not wanting to pay these people a living wage. These are the same people that during the pandemic, I want to remind everyone, they were considered essential workers because supplies have to move. Products have to move. So they still had to work. And willing to bet they were working overtime to get those goods to us. So it wasn't just them, right? It was the railroad workers. It was the John Deere workers. It's the school teachers. It's the nurses. Like, people are not paid a living wage. And now you're going to hear a little bit about the automation issue.
As they come in with new technology, we just caught them in Mobile, Alabama, called Autogate. And that means the trucks are coming in and they're already checked in somewhere else and not using the checkers in the ILA. Circumventing the contract. They don't care. They don't care. It's not fair. And if we don't put our foot down now, they would like to run over us, and we're not going to allow that.
You are going to grind the economy to a halt here on the East Coast and the Gulf Coast.
No, not us.
You hear that? It's your fault. You're going to grind the economy to a halt. You're going to grind the economy to a halt. It's all your fault. So one of the problems he mentioned there was automation. So it appears there is now technology, or at least there was at least a year ago, because they've been planning this for a year. There's technology that has been implemented with their job, and they feel that this is going to impact their employment. This is going to impact their work, and they don't want it. Now, I want to remind you again, what did Andrew Yang tell you in 2020 about automation and about jobs and about AI? They've been warning us about this for quite some time. So the last thing you should do, whether you agree with their strike demands or not, the last thing that we should do is point fingers at the worker.
Hey, don't spin it now because you're Fox News. They're going to drive it.
But are you worried? Are you worried that this
They have the
strike?
capital to settle this thing.
Are you worried that this strike is going to hurt the everyday American, the farmers that need to reach the export market? They're
Listen,
telling me that they're going to hurt through
Now
all
you
of
start
this.
to realize who the longshoremen are, right?
Nobody cares.
People never gave a about us until now, when they finally realized that the chain is being broke now. Cars won't come in. Food won't come in. Clothing won't come in. You know how many people depend on our jobs? Half the world. And it's time for them and time for Washington to put so much pressure on them to take care of us, because we took care of them and we're here 135 years and brought them where they are today, and they don't want to share. And I'm done.
Yeah, I guess he told them. He said they don't want to share. Now, to be fair, because I want to be honest with you, the president of that organization does make quite a bit of money. So it's not so much that he's fighting for himself. He's fighting for the other workers. I think last time I checked, he's making at least $700,000 a year total compensation package. So that includes the benefits as well. But the other people are not making that. So keep that in mind, not making that. Now, I want you to listen to this guy here. He posted this video on TikTok. He's talking about what would happen over a course of time if this strike does continue. So I want you to hear how this will impact all of us. Check this out.
What happens if our seaports go on strike? The strike is set for October 1st, so you better share this with everyone. Because if our ports close, everything we depend on closes with it. Let's talk about what would happen within the month of October. On day one, international fuel shipments are the first to feel the impact. Crude oil tankers stuck offshore means no new fuel entering refineries. By the end of the day, concerns spread across industries as gas stations, trucking companies, and airlines brace for immediate shortages. Everything from fuel to imported goods is at risk, but fuel becomes the most critical loss. By day 3, gas stations are starting to run dry and rationing begins. Prices surge as demand skyrockets. Without fuel, trucks can't deliver goods, and the first shortages show up in grocery stores.
Okay. Did everybody hear that part? So we're talking about gas prices increasing again. We've already gone through that. And also now he's getting to the food shortages in grocery stores. So what did I say? When there is a shortage, the prices will increase. So we're talking about, as much as the Biden administration is, bragging about the cost of it, like inflation going down, they still tell you that the grocery store prices are high. And Kamala said her plan is to, stop CEOs, stop these corporations from price gouging if she became president. But now we're looking at another situation where, if the grocery store prices are already high and you have this strike, if it continues, we don't know how long it's going to continue, but if it does continue for quite some time, then we're also talking about the prices increasing even more than where they are now. So this is why, and see, this is why, I mean, I don't know, are we calling this the October surprise? Maybe this is the October surprise. But this is why it was very important that those prices were already reduced, because now we're looking at possible more increases.
Fuel, trucks can't deliver goods, and the first shortages show up in grocery stores. Businesses relying on imported oil, like refineries, scramble to maintain operations with whatever reserves they have left. The ripple effect starts to hit home. No fuel means no transportation, and without transportation, the flow of goods stop. Day 7, yep. The energy crisis takes hold. Within the first week, the impact of fuel shortage deepens. Trucks, trains, and ships that move essential supplies across the country slow to a halt. Agriculture and manufacturing are crippled, unable to operate without fuel for machinery and transportation. Airlines begin canceling flights, and public transportation services are cut. Gas prices hit all-time highs as panic buying intensifies. By week 2, the power grid struggles and collapse looms. Power plants that rely on imported fuel start to struggle, and blackouts spread as they ration what's left. People begin hoarding fuel, and chaos erupts at the pumps. The stock market plummets as industries reliant on global supply chains begin to crumble. The economy falters, and unemployment skyrockets as factories close and businesses shutter.
Now, I already told you last week that Black unemployment alone has already surged for 2024 compared to any other demographic group. So just imagine what will happen again. We're just now going, he said week 2. So this is just now what would happen week 2. We just started week 1. So they don't have to be on strike that long for this to be, painful to a lot of us.
By week 4, total breakdown of society. By the end of the month, the energy crisis and fuel shortages bring society to its knees. Cities erupt into fuel riots, and law enforcement is overwhelmed. With no fuel, food distribution collapses, and starvation becomes a real threat. Communities are left to fend for themselves as fuel reserves dry up completely, leaving transportation, emergency services, and the economy in ruins. Without ports, crude oil can't get in. Without crude oil, fuel can't be made. Without fuel, everything grinds to a halt. When the fuel stops, America stops. And just so we're clear, this could all happen within the month of October. AP out.
So is this the October surprise, ladies and gentlemen? But that is very real what he was telling you there. And this is why I said before that one of the ways to move towards a general strike is to either have the dock workers go on strike, the truckers go on strike, and of course, the railroad workers go on strike, because they are a part of the supply chain. Without them, our supplies do not move. That is just a very real reality. Now, peep this, fam. The Chamber of Commerce is already asking Joe Biden to intervene because they already know what's going to happen. So it says here, the Chamber of Commerce calls on Biden to stop dock workers' strike, citing inflation fears. Labor stoppage could raise cost of electronics, cars, and plastic products, economist says. So they're already giving the heads up to Biden. So you know how he intervened with the railroad workers trying to go on strike. It says here that they wrote a letter to Biden on Monday urging him to invoke a federal labor law that could delay the potential strike at East Coast and Gulf ports for as many as 80 days while workers and shipping containers continue to negotiate. Americans experience the pain of delays and shortages of goods during the pandemic era supply chain backlogs in 2021. It would be unconscionable to allow a contract dispute to inflict such a shock to our economy. So again, that tells me this is your general strike. Now, imagine if those port workers also had another set of demands. Imagine if some of their demands are things that all of us kind of need, like healthcare. What if they had that as part of their demands? Oh, yeah, we'll get back to work when you give everybody healthcare in this country. We'll do that. We'll get back to work when you stop giving weapons to Israel and Ukraine. We'll do that. See, these are the things that we got to think bigger, right? Now, obviously, when employees go on strike, it's because of the needs that they're demanding at their job, at their employer. But I'm trying to teach us how to think bigger. Now, do I think they're going to do this? Probably not. because all of them probably don't agree on foreign policy. All of them probably don't agree that everyone should have health care. But this is just a way that you can start to move the needle. When we interviewed the Kellogg's workers on RBN when they went on strike, Rome actually interviewed them on the ground. And he asked one of the guys in the union, he said, do you think everyone in this country should have health care? And he said, yeah. And by the way, he's not a Democrat, not a progressive at all. But he said, yeah, everybody should have health care. So these are things I want us to start thinking about, folks. I want us to start thinking a little bit bigger and thinking about how we can possibly move the needle a little bit to get what we want. We've made demands. Now we have to find ways to make those demands come to life.